Hi, it's Amanda with Create, Inspire, Convert, and on this week's episode, we're going to talk about how to measure the effectiveness of the content you're creating to promote your business online. What should you specifically be tracking? What should you be considering to understand if it's working or not? That's what we'll cover this week, so let's dive right in.
Hi there. Welcome to Create, Inspire, Convert, a podcast for business owners and marketers who are looking to deepen their knowledge about creative and experience-focused online marketing. I'm your host, Amanda Rosen. Let's get to this week's episode.
Okay, so the last couple episodes, we've been spending a lot of time talking about content. It's honestly one of my most favorite subjects. I'm sorry if you don't agree with me, but it's my podcast, so... And if you missed the last couple episodes, you might want to catch up on them because we were talking about niching down and how that relates to your content strategy, like specifically how it helps. And then we were also talking about how do you find content ideas. So if you have ever felt stuck on what to even post about online or what to create content about, that could really be helpful for you. And then today what we're going to be shifting into is actually a 3-part series all about measuring the effectiveness of that content that you're creating with your content strategy, using those ideas that you came up with, which are based on your niche. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because I feel like there is a pretty common misconception around measuring the effectiveness of content, and that it's that your content kind of exists in a vacuum. So for example, I hear so often people saying, I got a lot of likes, so I think what I'm doing must be working. And I have to tell you that that is not really the indicator of whether or not it's working. It's definitely a part of the equation, but unless your sole goal is to just get likes on the stuff you put on Instagram as an example, it's not that whole story. I mean, if that is your goal, great, you're winning. But if it's not your goal, and I'm guessing it's not, I'm guessing your goal is to get customers or clients, you need a way to connect the likes that you're getting on that post that you put up on Instagram to the actions in your business that drive revenue. So that means understanding the whole funnel and how your content sits inside of it and how your content works to drive someone through the funnel. And that's what we'll be covering in this 3-part series because it's all about measuring the effectiveness of the content pieces at each stage of the funnel. Okay, so before we really get into it, let's talk about what that funnel is. Because I mentioned that your content sits inside the funnel. And my brain tends to think in funnels when it comes to marketing because everything can be arranged in that way, which with a funnel basically being structured like somebody becomes aware of something, a desire that they have, a problem they want solved, an experience they'd like to have, and they start researching how to make it happen. And then they make a decision to work with someone to make that happen. And that is the most basic way to break down what a funnel is. And at each of those phases, there's 3 of them that I just mentioned: awareness, consideration, and conversion. There are all kinds of things that happen on the front end, so things that people see, which is your content, and on the back end, things people don't see, which is like your tech, your operations, your sales approach, all of that stuff. And those things all layer together, like the content that you're putting out on the front and all the operational things you have on the back, they layer together to create a funnel or a journey that someone goes through when they meet your business, interact with it, and kind of move through. And they also are guided by your overarching strategy, which takes us back to those other episodes I mentioned. So having an understanding of where you sit in the market, your position, what is the message that you're putting out there, which informs those content ideas. And all of it works together. That's really marketing 101. So you've got that funnel, you've got your positioning, you've got your message, you've got your strategy, and it all works together to create this experience that someone has when they find your business, interact with it, and kind of move forward. Or they fall away if they don't resonate. So we're going to break down this 3-part series based on the funnel. And we'll be talking about the metrics that you need to measure at the awareness phase, at the consideration phase, which is in that middle part where they're thinking about their options, and then at the bottom, which is the conversion phase or the purchase phase, when they decide to become a client or customer. Because there's different things to track. And when you start tracking those metrics at each of those phases, that's really how you achieve what I mentioned earlier, which is connecting the likes that you're getting on your social media posts to the ultimate action that you want someone to take when they work with you. So when you start tracking metrics at each phase, then you can start seeing holes in your strategy, or you can see what's working, or you can see where you need to pivot or adapt or adjust your position or whatever it may be. That's how you get strategic with the marketing that you do online. Okay, so let's really get into it now. So we're going to be talking today about awareness metrics. And remember at the beginning when I said likes, that is one example. So there are really a couple things to consider in the awareness phase. The first is vanity metrics. If you just ever look at vanity metrics on their own, which is what a lot of people do, and they don't look at them in context of the funnel, you are not really getting the full picture. You're just kind of thinking like, oh, great, they're liking it. And then you're probably often wondering, but why aren't they buying? And the reason that you don't know the answer to that question is because you've not connected analysis to the other sections of the funnel and those content pieces that you're putting out there, or you may not even be putting any content out there that's in the middle and bottom of the funnel. So these vanity metrics are things like the likes, comments, saves, shares, video views, story views, follows, pins, all of that kind of stuff. Any little action that someone takes, like a micro action that they take on a social media platform, is a vanity metric. And you should definitely track them, but you do not need to track all of them. So we're going to talk about the most important ones to track in just a second. And then we're also going to talk about a way to look at them, because otherwise it's just like huge collections of numbers and you're like, what does any of this mean? So the way that you bring meaning to those vanity metrics is through something called an engagement rate, which is a percentage. It's actually really easy to calculate, and we're going to talk about it. Yes, I'm going to make you do math. So when you're figuring out your engagement rate, you're going to tally up all the engagements that a piece of content got. So all of the views and the likes and the comments or whatever it was, depending on the content piece. And then you're going to divide that number by the number of impressions on that particular piece of content, which the social media platform you're doing this for will tell you all of that information. The reason that you want to do impressions is because that's the number of times that content piece was seen. And so you're trying to understand, out of all the times that this content piece was seen, how many times did it actually get an engagement? And that is what that engagement rate is. So once you've tallied up the number of engagements, divided it by the number of impressions, you're going to multiply that by 100 to get a percentage. So here's the thing with engagement rate. I can't tell you what a good one is because it varies wildly by platform and by industry and by niche. So for example, there are definitely like some broad guidelines. Like on Facebook, a good engagement rate could be anywhere between like 1% and 2%. But on Twitter, it's really low. It's like 0.5 to 2%. But on TikTok, it's really high. It's like 50% or more. So it just spans way too much for anyone to ever be able to tell you like, here, you should be aiming for this particular engagement rate. But what I can tell you is that if you take a few weeks to start tracking your own engagement rate, you can establish your own baseline on your existing content. And then you can start watching for trends and seeing like, okay, I tend to average, like a 4% engagement rate, but when I post about this, it actually shoots up to a 10% engagement rate or something like that. So you can start seeing those pieces of content that are working. Another way to find the pieces of content that are working, and this is getting back to what I mentioned earlier about like of those vanity metrics, which are the most important ones to track, it's looking at the ones that get either a combo or a trio of these types of interactions: comments, shares, saves, and follows. So you could start looking for content pieces that get comments and shares, or comments and saves, or comments and follows, or follows and comments, whatever you want to do, however you want to combine it. The reason that you want to focus on these is because comments, shares, saves, and follows show a really strong correlation between resonating with a piece of content and like the consideration phase of the funnel. So in other words, content pieces that get comments, shares, saves, and follows are probably content pieces that are moving people from awareness to consideration, or are at least capturing them in awareness and preparing them to move into consideration. So they are really strong content pieces. And once you can start isolating which of your content pieces get those combinations of engagements, then you can start iterating on those topics and figuring out, what was it that I did? Was it because it was a video? Was it because it was an image or a carousel? Or was it this particular topic? That's when you can start testing and kind of going a little bit crazy with figuring out what's working and what's not working. Okay, so once you've kind of gotten that handled, so you're starting to track your vanity metrics, but you are going to apply meaning to them. You're not just tracking them to track them. And you're figuring out what your engagement rate is. The next thing to look at is actually your website traffic, believe it or not. So you're going to need some kind of analytics software, whether it's from a third party like Google, or it might be built into the system that you use for your website. Whatever it is that you use, just make sure it tells you the traffic by channel. So a channel is just a way that someone gets to your website. An example of a channel is a social platform, or an email, or a Google search, or direct, like they literally typed it into the browser bar. These are all channels, and most analytics softwares will report traffic by channel. So in other words, they'll tell you, based on a period of time that you've specified, you got X number of page views from Facebook, this many from email, this many from Instagram, and so on. And what you want to be looking at is 2 channels in particular when it comes to awareness content, and that is social media. I'm sure you could guess that. And the second is organic search. So what you'll start doing is you'll start looking, you could do it on a week by week basis, or you could do it in 30-day increments. It's up to you. It depends on how frequently you're putting out content. If you're putting out content really frequently, like daily, then it's good to check in once a week. But if you're more of an occasional poster, you could get away with only looking once a month. So what you'll do is you'll check that report, and you'll look at those acquisition channels, like the channels that brought you traffic, and you'll dive deeper into the social media and the organic search one. So on the social media one, you'll want to know which platforms. And the reason is you might be putting a bunch of effort into something like Facebook, but then come to find out that random Pinterest pin that you put up back in 2015 has been silently driving traffic to your website for the past 6 years or 7 years. I can't do math. And it is making up like 20% of your traffic. And that is true for me. Like, I recently learned this on my hobby website that I have, that a random pin that I actually put up in 2010 makes up 30% of my website traffic, which is insane to me. So here I've been going crazy over Facebook when I should have been focusing on Pinterest. So having a handle on that kind of information helps you make strategic decisions about the way that you market your business. Now, the other channel that I mentioned that you want to look at is your organic search. And when you look at that, you can see the search engines that are bringing traffic, but you can also, if you're using Google Analytics, you can start looking at the search terms that brought someone to your website. So specifically, you want to know what search terms brought people to your homepage and to your about page, because those are the pages that people look at when they become aware and they start considering who you are, what you do, and whether or not you can help them. If you start looking at the search terms that brought people to those pages of your website, then you can start making decisions about your content. Like, how can I use these search terms in my social media content? Can I turn them into hashtags? Where can I use these search terms elsewhere on my website? How can I get even more traffic? How can I better optimize these keywords into the content, organically, in a way that feels authentic and not keyword stuffing, which, by the way, doesn't work anymore. It is 2022 after all. So that is what you want to think about when you are looking at the website reporting as it relates to awareness level content. And that's it. So let's do a quick recap. So when you're thinking about how the awareness content that you're putting out there, which is all the content that is just kind of designed to spark realization that you exist as a brand or a business and that you can help with this specific desire, experience, or problem, you want to start tracking those vanity metrics like comments, saves, shares, and follows. And you want to look at your engagement rate on the content pieces that you're putting out. And you want to do this consistently over a period of time so that you can start establishing a baseline for yourself and making decisions about what type of content is working so that you can start analyzing and going deeper and testing things like images versus videos, opening headlines that are shocking versus not shocking, hashtag placements, all those kinds of things. That's how you start getting into that test phase. Then you'll also start looking at your website traffic, specifically reports that tell you which channels are bringing traffic to your website through social media. So what platforms are your strongest traffic drivers? And then on organic search, what search engines seem to be working best for you? And then if you're able to, what keywords are people putting into those search engines to actually find you? And then how can you make best use of those keywords on your social media content and on your website itself? And that's it. So next week, we will be back to talk about that middle of the funnel content analysis and what that means. And that means it's content that is driving consideration. So they've become aware, they know that they have this specific desire or problem or experience, they know about you, and they know that you are probably someone who can help. And the job of consideration content is to answer that question and to show them exactly how you can help and what it is that you do, and to educate them and to empower them with knowledge so that they can make a decision. So that's when you start familiarizing them with jargon or specific terms of your industry or the titles of the programs that you offer, those kinds of things. And so we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that and how you measure the effectiveness of that kind of content next week. So I'll see you then. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you're subscribed and feel free to share it with a friend if you think they would resonate with it too. And if you had any awesome takeaways or thoughts or ideas that you want to share with me, you can always reach out to me on Instagram. I'm Amanda M. Rosen, and I would love to hear from you. Or you can just shoot me an email, hello@createinspireconvert.com. Thanks so much. I appreciate you listening, and I will see you next week.